Okay, recording started. Good. Let's start. So last week we start talking about entrepreneurship. We cover the definition of entrepreneurship. So it's pretty much just entrepreneur which works for a company. So for example, such as Vietnam Group. So when you work for a company, you set up their new division or new business. So Vietnam Group is a good example because they have so many different child company which belongs to the parent companies, which is Vietnam Group. So when we talk about child companies such as VinFast or VinHome or VinHealth or Vin Education and so on. They have a lot of child companies, so hence they need the equivalent of entrepreneur, which is basically entrepreneur, to run a lot of their operation for them, or even to set up these new company for them. Yeah, so the people which set up these company for them are entrepreneurs, or in other words, corporate entrepreneurs. And basically, from country to country, different country or different culture have different mixture between entrepreneur and entrepreneurs. Yes, entrepreneurs are working for companies. Entrepreneurs are basically set up companies for themselves. We looked at some example of entrepreneurs for corporations, such as helping them to have sustainable regeneration or organizational rejuvenation or strategic renewal or domain redefinition, which is basically just staking out new sectors of the market itself. Then we talked about potential conflict of interest when it comes to entrepreneur. Because both the parent and the child companies, the parent being established companies, whereas the child companies is a startup, they have different focus overall, and hence there's a lot of potential for conflict of interest. We cover quite a lot of examples of conflict of interest and how the conflict of interest between the parent and the child potentially can have an adverse effect on the startup or the entrepreneur. We looked quite a few examples on this table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 example. On the next slide, another 5 examples as well. So we looked at 10 examples where there are potential for conflict of interest. So there will be conflict of interest because established companies are different from startups as a whole. So in general, parent companies in general have, for example, 5-year plan, and not only that, for them they focus more on return on investment or profitability or sustainable profitability and so on. Whereas startups in general, they operate at a different level. So for them, they're more focused on innovation. They more focus on growing their market share more so than return on investment or profitability. For them, it's all to do with obtaining as big a market share as possible for them to reach critical size before they start to worry about profitability. And for them, most startup does not survive past their first year. So for them, a 5-year plan, business plan, does not make sense or much sense at all when they don't even know if they survive past the first year. So hence, for startups and so on, a 1-year plan or detailed 1-year plan is more than adequate for their purposes. So let's continue. Other problems when it comes to conflict of interest, especially you need to be able to set an environment where startup can succeed under a corporate environment. So for a startup to succeed under a corporate environment, it needs to have atmosphere and vision. There needs to be a clear-cut vision of and recognized support for innovation or innovative environment. And so typically for parent companies, established companies, innovation is not a major or the main focus. For them, the business is already set up, they have a business plan, they have process in place and so on. So it's for them to maintain the process, the established process itself. For startup, the innovation part is more important. So it's not necessarily the same between parent and child company. There's need also to be an orientation towards the market. For startups, it's more about growth compared to established companies. So it's about market share is a lot more important than return on investment or profitability. So there needs to be a vision between the parent company and the child company to have to the reality of the marketplace. Example which we looked at, which we talked about, is, for example, Shopee, Grab, and so on. These companies, startups, are not profitable. Most likely, most e-commerce websites, such as the Shopee and the Lazada and the Tiki, in general, they it takes them about 10 years before they become profitable. So that 10 years, that initial 10 years, is utilized to grow the market share itself. So growing the market share is a lot more important. So in general, they operate at a loss so they can grow the market shares. And basically, they do a lot of subsidizing or subsidies in terms of deliveries and so on. So hence, a lot of these e-commerce websites, you get free deliveries just to attract the clients so they can grow the market shares, even at a loss to them itself. So for them, it's more important is growing the market shares rather than profitability. Separate to market shares and so on, in general, startups tend to have a very small or flat organization. As a startup and so on, in general, they only usually two levels. So you have a manager and you have employees. Whereas in large corporations, there's middle managers and senior managers, and then the CEO and so on. There are many different levels. So it introduces a lot of bureaucracy, red tapes and so on. So in general, for startups, they are very, very different. You cannot have all these red tapes and bureaucracy when you want to move fast. So hence startups in general tend to have very small or very flat organizational structures and so on. And in general, startups tend to need multiple approach. They don't know what it works. They're not established companies because they're still in that development stage or in innovative or innovation stage itself. So it's going to be very, very different from the established companies. Established companies tend to have a well-planned process and everything in place. So hence, there's going to be a difference between the parent companies and the child companies. And there needs to be encouragement or encourage projects to proceed in parallel development. With startups as well, there needs to be constantly learning, interactive learning, and so on, because things change. Startups is still in that invention stage itself. So there are myths, which are very similar to what we talked about earlier in terms of entrepreneur myth. Here, entrepreneurs have their own myths as well. So we'll try to dispel some of these myths. So myth number one, the primary motivation of entrepreneur is a desire for wealth as well as climb in the corporate ladder. Yeah, very similar to entrepreneur, liking for wealth and materialism is very important. Because if you don't have, or entrepreneur or even entrepreneur, if they don't have a desire for wealth or materialism or climbing the corporate ladder, then they would not go out there and do actual work, such as in startups and so on. So there needs to be motivation and so on. So this is partial truth. It's not all about wealth and corporate ladder, but it helps. It helps motivate the entrepreneur to go out there or to do something which they might be or find uncomfortable for themselves. Second myth is entrepreneur are high risk taker. So very similar problems as in the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs, entrepreneur and entrepreneur, they are not gamblers. They are not high risk taker. You know? Even though risk is part of the entrepreneur definition, the kind of risks which entrepreneur and entrepreneur takes are calculated risks. We do calculation. We know how much it costs to start a business and how much potential profitability it's on. So these things are calculated, and if we can manage the risk, then we'll take on the risk. If we cannot manage the risk, then that would be gambling and high risk taking and so on. So in general, entrepreneur and entrepreneur, they are not gamblers. You know, they take on calculated risks. Myth number three, entrepreneur lacks analytical skills, and luck is all you need. So very similar comments to the entrepreneur as well. Luck and money and so on are very, very important. If you have infinite amount of luck or infinite amount of money, then entrepreneur or entrepreneur are very, very easy. But in general, most real world, most people, most of us, most human guys, do not have infinite amount of money or infinite amount of luck. We need to be able to make our own luck by reducing the risks which we're taking on, as well as learn from our mistakes and our errors and so on, to improve on our entrepreneur and entrepreneurial skills. So it takes a lot of analytical skills to do business plan or website or Android apps and so on. And that's what this course is about. You need these analytical skills, otherwise entrepreneur would be, it would just be gambling or high risk taking itself. Myth number four, entrepreneur lacks moral as well as ethics due to their strong desire to succeed. Yes, a strong desire to succeed is very important. It can be very, very motivating for them to go out there and do something which they might find uncomfortable, but not at any cost. You know, entrepreneur and entrepreneur don't do things at any cost. And things like lack of morals and ethics, because you have to work with other people, whether other people means your employees or customers or your suppliers or the tax authority or the legal or various different authority you have to work with. And hence, moral and ethics are very important, because if you don't have moral and ethics, people will not want to work with you. So a strong desire to succeed is very important because it gets you out there to do something about it, or get you motivated to do something like starting a startup, but not at any cost. Myth number 5, entrepreneurs have a power-hungry attitude, which is very, very important. Lack of power-hungry, you're going to lose a lot of motivation to do something. Because starting a startup can be difficult if you don't have the required motivation. Because having a salary working for a company is a lot easier overall compared to going out of your way to start a startup and take on the various risks and hard work and so on associated with starting a company. So power-hungry attitude is very important. They want to venture the venture or their startup to grow as big and as fast as it can. Well, it's I wouldn't call it a total myth itself. Power-hungry attitude is good. And like everyone, like all human, of course they want to grow their startup as fast and as big as possible. And that's what the main aim of what starting a startup is, or starting your companies. Of course, you will hope for the best. You hope to grow as big or as fast as you can. Specific elements when it comes to entrepreneurship, very similar to before. You need to develop the vision within the parent companies to want to start to encourage startups into other market sectors. So in doing so, you need to encourage innovation. You need to, with innovation, we're talking about 4 different kinds of innovation. We'll go into these in depth later on, but the 4 different kinds of innovation are radical innovation, incremental innovation, or structuring and entrepreneurial climate itself, as well as developing the team itself. So by encouraging these things, you're more likely to make a successful entrepreneur in general within the corporate or the parent companies itself, which can be very, very different. Yeah, so parent companies can operate differently. They're going to have a lot of bureaucracy and red tapes. They're going to focus more on profitabilities and so on, where our startups are very, very different. So hence you need to have not only vision and so on, you need to have the so-called encouraging innovation as well. With entrepreneur, in general, there are 4 different kinds of entrepreneurial activities among parent companies. These 4 different way of doing entrepreneur are the ecosystem venturing. Let me just label them. Oops. 2 is the innovation venturing. 3 is the harvest venturing, and lastly, it's the private equity venturing. So with ecosystem venturing, the main focus of parent companies which do eco venturing, basically they take minority stake of the startup, typically in the similar kind of supply chain. Hence, that's why it is ecosystem. So they take minority stake in the supplier or the customers, and or complementers to improve the prospect of the existing business. So it's going up the supply chain or go down the supply chain. They will invest in the startups to help them go up and down the supply chain. And in general, they generate values through supplying these, whether up the supply chain or down the supply chain, they supply these with businesses. So they give businesses to, say, they set up a startup to do supply for their operation, for example. And not only that, they will also give business to them that they will buy from the supplier. And similarly, if it is the customers, if they go down the supply chain and they set up a startup to purchase the product which the parent companies manufacture, for example, then the parent companies will give business or give discounts or give subsidies to the customers as well, being a child company of theirs. So they can generate values through these, not only giving business to up the supply, down the supply chain, but also subsidizing the supply chain as well through commercial links, as well as investing in the supplier or the customer. Next, it's the innovation venturing. They use venturing techniques as a more effective means of performing an existing functionality or activities, often but not exclusive to R&D. So it's setting up a startup which focus more on R&D. So for example, such as pharmaceutical companies. In general, pharmaceutical companies tend to manufacture drugs and so on, or vaccine. But in general, they do not do much in terms of focusing on R&D. Typically, they will invest in biotech companies, which more focus on R&D, to be able to buy the intellectual properties for them to manufacture drugs, for example, and similarly to other industrial sectors as well. It doesn't have to be pharmaceutical and biotech companies, but other companies which are more focused on manufacturing and distribution. And in general, they will set up separate entity to do their R&D, and that's these are the innovation venturing. Thirdly are the harvest venturing. So these in general tend to generate cash from harvesting spare resources. So a good example would be university, for example. So for example, at the International University, we have a department called the I think it's the intellectual property or transfer, technology transfer department. So these basically invest in startups from the, whether it's from the biotech department of the university or engineering university, to harvest these technology or intellectual property. So their main purpose is, for example, university tends to have a backlog of research or technology. For them, for the technology transfer department, their job is just to harvest this backlog of technology which the university already have, for example. And lastly is the private equity venturing. So these are typically venture capital, special investment funds, which invest in startups. Yeah, so pretty much VC or venture capital and pretty much what you kind of see in your clean tech assignment. In general, they tend to take advantage of a unique deal flow through their contacts and their networking, as well as relevant and non-tradable assets. So they invest in these startups by purchasing these private equities. In other words, these equities are not listed on any stock market. It is a private transaction between the VC, or the venture capital, and the startup to participate directly in the venture capital itself, supplying the startup with capital and taking the private equity position in the company or in the startup. In general, these four different venturing or method of entrepreneurships tends to have their pros and their cons, their advantages as well as their disadvantages. The main pitfall for eco-venturing, that's going up the supply chain and down the supply, investing in startup up the supply chain or down the supply chain, they tend to lose focus of their pitfall. And in general, they invest too widely as well as seeking too much autonomy up and down the supply chain itself. Yeah, for them, there might be a specialist doing what they're doing, going up the supply chain, down the supply chain. They might be unfamiliar and they're spreading their expertise widely and so on. So hence they will lose out on their focus. The pitfall, or the main pitfall for the innovation driven kind of venturing, in general, they tend to create a culture, or so-called culture change pitfall, aiming for a broad impact on culture and so on, and change rather than focusing on improving part of a function itself. So the R&D, or the so-called research and development startups themselves, compare that to the parent companies. I mean, for our example, which we give here, is pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies. The two cultures are different. And their focus are very different. One mainly focusing on manufacturing and distribution, which is the pharmaceutical companies, and biotech are more focused on research and developing new products and so on. For the harvesting venturing, such as university and so on, or technical university and so on, the main pitfall, or the new leg pitfall, they are seeking to develop new growth platforms in addition to their harvesting as well. So they might lose out on not being focusing on any one thing. There's so many things, typically at the university, for example, many departments with many different technology, and spreading yourself too wide and too thinly can create problems, or so-called pitfall. For the fourth kind of entrepreneurship is the VC, or the private equity venturing. The main pitfall is the anyone can do this pitfall. In other words, is anyone can set up a venture capital and invest in startup. You know, it's not as easy as what people believe. So believing it as easy because others have success in the or in VC, or investing in startups. It's not as easy. There's a lot of research needed, and hence a lot of the venture capital which you go and see consists of expert, whether it's people with PhD or even entrepreneur, real life entrepreneurs and so on, not just anyone can be a venture capitalist. You know, they are expertise in various different areas themselves. So example, we've gone through various different examples for these entrepreneurships, such as an ecosystem where they go up and down the supply chain. Good example would be Intel, not only invested in community, but also they're not invested down the supply chain, but also up the supply chain in terms of their suppliers and so on as well. So Intel is a good example. They created the Wi-Fi standard, but then on top of that, they created quite a lot of other things as well, from things like the USB standard, as well as more recently the Thunderbolt standard as well, in terms of connecting monitors and so on, for those who are familiar with technology. With the innovation venturing, we gave examples such as pharmaceutical and biotech companies. Another example would be Xerox, the photocopier manufacturers and so on. At one point, they are very famous for inventing a lot of new technology, including Windows. Microsoft did not invent Windows. The technology actually came from Xerox, and Microsoft pretty much just copied the window from the photocopy machines, which Xerox has invented way before Microsoft did it. So Xerox is another good example. In general, they focus more on R&D. They identify ideas from within the company itself through their Xerox machine or their photocopy machine, and providing financing for a lot of these new technology which they help to invent. For the harvesting venturing, we kind of given the good example of university, and not only that, technology transfer departments and so on. But other potential companies which do the same thing, Lucent New Ventures. Lucent used to belongs to Bell Labs, one of the largest telecommunication company, which got broken up into, you probably heard of AT&T and various different other telecommunication companies. So Lucent is just part of the research group, part of that Bell Labs group itself. They have their own sort of like focusing their own companies or group, which focus mainly on harvesting their technology or their research and commercializing their research. Similarly, universities do the same thing, and that's what the National University Technologies Transfer Department do. They're trying to commercialize the intellectual property or the technology coming out of the various different science department, from biotech department to engineering or computer science department, for example. And lastly, for the private equity or the venture capital venturing, so example are venture capital. In Vietnam, there's quite a few. You have Vina Capital, you have Dragon Capital, you have Mekong Capital, many venture capital companies in Vietnam, which are example. Other example is General Electric, GE Equity, which do invest in startups as well. They invest in spin-off of the parent General Electric companies, in terms of manufacturing electronic components, refrigerators and washing machines and so on. Or Nokia Venture is another good example as well. But here in Vietnam, we have, in terms of venture capital, we have Vina Capital, Mekong Capital, and so on. Quite a few different VC or venture capital company here in Vietnam. In general, the way in which we talk about motivating the startup, so these ecosystems and innovation and so on, these parent companies you need to be able to motivate these startups. They can motivate them by giving the founder or the entrepreneur incentives. With the ecosystem venturing, the incentive tends to be significant cash bonuses to the entrepreneur. They have significant bonus schemes based on the impact of existing businesses and portfolio performance, but then they don't have any carry interest. It means actual shares in the child company itself. For innovation venturing, in general, they motivate them through performance benchmarking against other part of their group. So in general, a parent company probably have more than one department or more than one child companies. For example, Vina Group, we take the example of Vina Group, we have VinFast, VinHome, Vin Education, Health, and so on. So they can benchmark the startup with their other successful startups which they have started before. And then based on financial interests are given to entrepreneur or entrepreneur, and in general, they do not nurture. So in general, they will compare them with other startups which they have. If you've done well, then they will give you financial rewards or incentives. For harvesting venturing, there are cash performances against allocated assets if they do invest in the company itself. And in general, they tend to pay large bonuses against the performance targets if targets are reached, and similar to the others, there are no carry interest. So in general, they do not give that much in terms of stocks and shares to the entrepreneur themselves. This will be different. And lastly, the private equity, they will give carry interest or stocks and shares in the company to the entrepreneurs. And in general, bonus and shares carry incentives or carry interest for them in line with the venture capital industry. And so there is usual standard how much, you probably watch Shark Tank. There is a standard in terms of each time a shark invests in a startup, there's usually a price for a given percentage of the companies. These in general tends to be relatively standard in general. It's not a number which they pull out of the air, but in general, there is a standard numbers around. So when you hear a lot of these Shark Tanks and so on programs, in general, you see the average percentages for how much money. So they're very similar. In general, Shark Tank, the TV programs are very similar to VC in a lot of ways. So entrepreneur, 10 commandments of entrepreneur. If you do want to become an entrepreneur, make sure you follow these 10 commandments. You need to build a team. Entrepreneurships, as well as entrepreneurships, in general, that isn't a solo activity. You need to have a team. But to have a team, you need to be able to share credit widely. It's not only you who contribute to the startups or success, it's you and your team. Your team help you to get where you are. So you need to be able to share credit widely. Especially when working with the parent companies, you need to be able to ask advice before you ask for resource. The issue with a lot of parent companies in general, they need their ego to be massaged. Once you massage the ego, it's a lot easier for you to ask for resources. You need to be able to under-promise and over-deliver. Yeah, not the other way around. You don't over-promise and then under-deliver. That is a very, very bad thing to do. So in general, always try to under-promise, but over-deliver what you promise. And in general, simplicity triggers the corporate immune system. In general, you do a lot of under-promise, over-deliver, people will like you a lot more and will believe you a lot more, rather than those which overpromise but underdeliver. Do any jobs needed to make these startups happen? Because as a startup, in general, it tends to be a small team. That's what the word startup is all about. You need to start from something, and usually it's from zero. So you're going to have a relatively quite small team, and everyone in that team needs to do what's needed to make the dream work. Yeah, so it means moving office, moving furniture around, cleaning the office, and so on. Then you have to do it. Who else is going to do it? It's just you and a relatively quite small team. So do any jobs needed to make your dream work, regardless of what your job description is, you know, whether even if you are the CEO of the startup, it means that you have to move furniture around or clean the office and so on, then you have to do it. Remember, it's easier to ask, sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness before you ask permission, especially when you work with parent companies. In general, startups and parent companies, they have different focuses and different priorities. So in general, because they have different focus and priorities or different interests, sometimes if you ask for permission, you're going to go through a lot of red tape and bureaucracy when it comes to parent companies. So sometimes it's a lot easier not to ask for permission and just go ahead and do it. And it's a lot easier to apologize to the parent companies through forgiveness than to go through all the red tapes needed. Yeah, we kind of see many good examples in Vietnam of this. Good example would be Uber and Grab, ride sharing. Yeah, before license or even laws and regulation were given to ride sharing companies and so on, they just jump into Vietnam market or even Saigon market, started their business and so on, without all the necessary paperwork. Yeah? And once they build themselves up to the size which they were before, taxi companies such as MyLink and Vinasun tried to shut them down through lobbying to the government. It was too late. Yeah? So sometimes don't ask for permission, go ahead and do it, and you can always apologize later. So, especially in Vietnam, it's a lot easier to go through that way. If they went through and asked for or do all the paperwork, they would not be able to do what they did. Yeah, and we would not see Grab or ride-sharing apps and so on in Vietnam, like the way in which we do now. Keep the best interests of the parent company and its customer in mind. Don't forget that it is the parent companies which help sponsor the startup itself. So you need to be able to keep the best interest of the companies as well as the parent company's customers as well. At the end of the day, they're the one who pay for what you're doing. Especially when you have to bend rules or circumvent the bureaucracy which usually exists in the parent companies. Yeah? So yes, do focus more on ask forgiveness and less in terms of permission, but don't go over the top, and not only that, ruin the parent company's reputation or make it lose its customers. So do the mistakes, but not at the cost of the company, the parent companies or its customers. Come to work each day, willing to be fired. You need to be able to push the boundary. Yeah? Startups and entrepreneurships and entrepreneurships, there are risks involved. And so if you want to play it safe, then it's not going to happen. You would not start a startup in the first place. We looked at entrepreneurships and so on. The definition, the word risk is built into it. Yeah. So you need to be able to come to work each day willing to be fired. Be true to your goal, but be realistic about how you achieve them as well. Yeah. So this number 9 is very similar to number 4. Yeah, under promise and over deliver. Yeah, don't do the opposite. Yeah, so be false to your goal, but be unreal to your how you achieve it. Yeah, that's going to be a bad thing the other way around. Yeah, so make sure you under promise and over deliver, as well as be true to your goal, but also be realistic about how you achieve it. Don't forget, at the end of the day, you need to be able to honor as well as educate your parent companies. You know, at the end of the day, they help created you, the startups in the first place. They sponsor the child companies or the startups in the first place. Okay, extra. The Dunning-Kruger effect is another phenomenon which exists in human beings. So if you're human, you're going to have certain flaws. Yeah, we talked about the survivorship bias, where we overlooked the information is given to us, and we don't realize that we make any mistakes at all, given what decision we need to make. Dunning-Kruger, kind of these two researchers, it's not one person here, the two researchers, it's Dunning and Kruger. Yeah. Basically did research in psychology, human psychology, and how experts view themselves compared to how newbies or students in general coming into the subject, or how new entrepreneurs come into subject with very, very high confidence that they will achieve. Yeah. So here, the x-axis represents knowledge field. So here are the beginners, new entrepreneurs, whereas the high knowledge are the so-called expert. But in general, new student to entrepreneurships and so on tends to have very, very high confidence overall that they will know everything. Yeah? Even more confident of their skill set compared to the expert. It doesn't have to be in the field of entrepreneurship. It's the same in the field of in university. It's the same thing. A lot of the topics which you start, of course, when you first started the topic, you don't know anything, so it's a question mark. But after the first few glance of the topics and so on, in general, your confidence will pick up, and in general, you tend to have a I know everything kind of effect. But as more and more you learn, as you read chapter 2 and chapter 3 and so on, you realize there's a lot more than what you thought it is. So there is there's more to this than I thought, and your confidence will go down. Yeah, it's the same with startups as well. When you first started, whether it's clean tech and so on, you think you know everything, that you will achieve that $2 or $3 billion in terms of founder's net worth. But once you started on the simulation, the first 1 or 2 simulations on, then you realize, ooh, there's more to this than I thought it was. Then as you do more and more simulation, as you become, as you gather more and more experience as an entrepreneur, or if you're a student, as you learn, you read chapter 4 and chapter 5 and so on, then things become a lot more complicated, and you think that you will never ever gonna understand the topic at all. It's confusing, it's complicated, it's too much material to learn and so on. You will get into that stage where you think that you never understand what entrepreneurship and startups or whatever the topic is going to be. But eventually you'll reach some bottom, where you think that everything does not make sense to you at all. You want to give up. These in general tends to be the worst point in terms of your confidence. But then slowly things start to make sense as you read chapter 6 and chapter 7 and so on, or as you start the simulation. Quite a few try at the clean tech simulation, and then after your 10th try or your 11th try, you start to see certain results. Sales start to come in. You start to make some profit, and things beginning to make sense to you when it comes to clean tech assignment. As well as chapter 6 and chapter 7, you start reading. The words start to come together, the theories start to come together, it starts to make sense. Then when you become an expert and so on, even at university level, whether you are a professor and so on, an entrepreneurship, or if you are a serial entrepreneurship, your confidence will never ever as high as compared to a beginner or a student. The topic is way more complicated. So from here, even you get to professorships, whether it is entrepreneurships or any topic at university, your confidence will never ever going to be as high as when you are a beginner. So in general, people new to the topic and so on, thinks that they know everything. Even you spend 20 or 30 years doing the topic, or teach the topic, or become professor of the topic, everything in general, you realize where you are in the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. So you get to that impression where it is, trust me, it is complicated. Whatever it is, from entrepreneurship, startups, and so on. It's very, very complicated, very difficult topics that no one will ever, even if you are Jeff Bezos and so on, with the setting up the biggest company in the world, Amazon and so on. Business is complicated, human are complicated, and so on. So his confidence, even though he's the richest man in the world, his confidence will never reach the peak of someone who just beginning to start out. And that is a human effect. If you're human, you're going to fall into this curve here. When you start something, in general, you tend to have very high confidence. But the more you work at it and the more you do and so on, the less you realize you know. So you're never going to get back to the same confidence. It's all about, trust me, it is complicated. And that is the Dunning-Kruger from the two researchers, Dunning and Kruger, who did this research, and they experimented in many different fields and many applications and so on. And in general, they tend to see this phenomena which exists in human psychology and so on. So be careful when it comes to when you start in your, whether it's clean tech or even starting as startups and so on. You will get through that peak in terms of confidence, and then it slowly drops off, but it will never ever get back to when you believe you know everything, even if you have spent 20, 30 years or even 100 simulation trial at clean tech assignment, you'll never get back to your peak in terms of confidence. Okay, what time is it now? It's 2:15. So after the 15 minutes break, we'll take a 15 minutes break, yeah? And when we return from the break, we'll take a vote in terms of the different topics and so on. We do a class vote, see which 15 topics we'll present to the class, or teach the class. In doing so, you get the bonus point. So before we do that, we'll take a 15 minutes break. Okay, Tessin, can you hear me? Okay, good, good.
Yes, teacher. Yes, teacher.
Okay, let me share you my screen. And as before, we do a show of hands as I go through the different topics. There's a few, there's 40 in total. So let's try to make it as smooth as possible. Okay, so to raise your hand, if you want to vote something, you use this button here, hands up button. Yeah, and the number of votes, like you see here, one hand raised. I will only count the number of hands raised, and that will be the number of votes for each topics. Yeah, so after each topics, yeah, you lower your hand. Don't forget to lower your hand as well. So you can vote more than once. Yeah, you can have more than one vote. That is, if you like more than one topics, that's totally fine. Then you vote all the topics which you like. Yeah, but each topic you can only have one vote on each topic. Yeah, but as many vote as you want on any of the topics. Yeah. So, for example, let's go for an example. Show of hands. Yeah, this is just for example. Show of hands for the topic eBiz Hub. Those who wants to hear eBiz Hub, raise your hand, please. Yeah, you can see I put 12 votes to, or 13 votes. Yeah, the number will go up and down, but I will take just what is the average or the maximum in each. Okay, you can lower your hands down, and then we'll start. Don't forget, you can have more than one votes for different topics. Okay, so first topic, pizza 4P. Yeah, for those who are interested, is a Japanese pizza started quite a few years, about 10 years ago, by a Japanese couple. Started in Ho Chi Minh City, and now since expanded to a whole chain. They borrow money from Mekong Capital to expand a whole chain. Now in Vietnam, there's maybe 10 or 20 or so pizza 4P all around the country now. For those who wants to listen to pizza 4P, please raise your hand. And you see 15 votes for pizza 4P. 18 votes. 18 out of a possibility of 36 or so in total. So 18 votes. Going, gone. Okay, 18 votes it is. Next is Apple. Apple, the computer and mobile phones, iPhone company. Who put up your hands? Who wants to listen to Apple? Apple. I can see 18 votes, 19 votes, 20 votes. 20 votes for Apple. 20 votes for Apple. Going, gone. 20 votes. Next is Starbucks. Starbucks. Put your hands up if you want to listen to Starbucks. The coffee, the American, Seattle-based American coffee company. Starbucks. 13 votes for Starbucks. Yeah. 13 votes for Starbucks. Or 15 votes for Starbucks. I just saw 15. It jumped up to 15 anyway. Next in Duolingo. This is the language company, I believe. Duolingo, language teaching companies, educational companies, 13 votes. No, jump to 15 votes, 15 votes. Okay, 15 votes it is. Next, it's Spotify. Spotify, the music streaming app. Spotify, music streaming, American based. How many votes? 14 votes, 14 votes, 15, going, gone. Jump to 16, okay, you got lucky, 16 votes. Next is Amazon. Amazon, the previously online bookstore, but now it sells all sort of different things. Online bookstores, now e-commerce. 16 votes, 16 votes, is that all? 18 votes, 18 votes, going, gone, 18 votes. Next is Abbott, the pharmaceutical company. They manufacture all sort of different chemical and medicine and so on. In Vietnam, more famous for their milk product. Their milk product for diabetes and various different illness and so on. Hands up, who wants to listen to Abbott, the pharmaceutical company? 12 hand raised, 12 hand raised, going, gone. 12 hand raised. Next is Access Trade Vietnam. I'm not too familiar with this company. Hands up for Access Trade Vietnam. 11 votes. Going, gone. 11 votes. Access Trade 11. Next is the Body Shop. Body Shop is the UK kind of organic cosmetic and all sort of things related to organic or plant-based kind of thing. It's UK based. 18 votes. 18 votes. 20. Ooh, 20. Expanded in Vietnam, I think about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. 21. It's quite a global chain as well. So you're in Europe, it's pretty much everywhere. Next is Vietnamese company, Vietnam Milk. Vietnam Milk, one of the more foreign favorite. Vietnam Milk produce quite a lot of different things, from milk to yogurt to other milk-based product. Vietnam Milk, stock market favorite. 18 votes. Going, gone. 18 votes. Next is Uniqlo. Uniqlo, it's a Japanese selling clothes. One of the largest company in Japan as well, but now it's a global company. Uniqlo, how many votes? Also exists in Vietnam. Their first store in Vietnam just a couple of months ago. 21 votes in total, let's see. Only a few stores in Vietnam. It's their initial stage. Globally, they're quite big. Next, Vietnam's success company in terms of software. It's first billion-dollar unicorn company in Vietnam in terms of startup. Vinagain. How many votes? Technology-based, software-based. There's a lot of apps. Do things like Zalo, and they did some e-commerce stuff as well. 15 votes. Going, gone. 15 votes. Next, it's Absolute Vodka. Absolute Vodka. I think it's Swedish, Scandinavian vodka, if I believe. One of my favorite drinks. It's quite cheap, but not that common in Vietnam. How many votes? 17 votes, 19 votes. Interesting, very interesting. 19 votes it is. Next is Intel. Intel, the computer chip, Intel chip manufacturer. Intel, how many votes? 13 votes, 13 votes, 14, going on, 15 votes in total. Next, Muji. Muji is the Japanese selling all sort of utility knickknacks and so on. I don't know if there's any, I think one store in Vietnam. Globally, there's a lot. Muji, 19 votes. 19 votes. Any more? Going, gone. 19 votes it is. 20 votes. 20 votes. Next, Samsung, Korean conglomerate, does all sorts of different things. From mobile phones, electronics, TV, to even the Kuala Lumpur Twin Tower, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, were constructed by Samsung, surprisingly. Not many people know that. 22 votes for Samsung. Highest so far, Samsung. Next, Lush, the nightclub in Saigon, I believe. Lush, yeah, at the end of which street is now? It's Little Dawn, I think. Near there, anyway. Lush, 21, 22, 23 votes. Ooh, potentially the highest. Seems like the class, most of the people in the class go to Lush then, for some reason. Lush, 23 votes. That's very surprising. Next, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. How many votes for Coca-Cola? The soft drink. 15 votes for Coca-Cola. Next in the list, Netflix, the online streaming TV and videos and programs and all sorts of different things. I just watched, was it Squid Game recently on Netflix myself. 17 votes, 18 votes, you know, Netflix does a lot of very interesting shows. 20 votes it is, going, gone. 20 votes. Next, Oatly, maybe cereal brand. Something to do with oats, maybe breakfast and so on. How many votes? 14 votes, is that all? 14 votes it is, 14. Next in the list, Pepsi, challenger to Coca-Cola. Let's see which ones have more votes, Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Only 14 votes, 14 votes it is. 14 votes it is then. Is it more Coca-Cola? Ooh, one less vote than Coca-Cola. Interesting. Sapito, never heard of it. I don't know what it is. Sapito, any hands for Sapito? Sapito, 9 hand raised, 10, 11 votes, 11 for Sapito. Next on the list, Roma Mix is probably a new drinks, fresh fruit press drink store or franchise or something. I'm not too familiar with it myself. Roma, I think the English name for Roma is Pennyworth. Pennywood is the English name. 16 for Pennywood Mips. $16 for Pennywood. Oh, I missed Tiki. Tiki. Next one on the list is Tiki. Tiki. How many hands for Tiki? Tiki. 16 votes, 17, 18, 20, 20 votes. E-commerce Tiki. 20 votes, 21 votes. Tiki. Next on the list, Gucci. Gucci, the Italian fashion house. Gucci. How many votes? 18 for Gucci. 19, fashion house, Italiano. 19 votes it is. What do I do? Next, Nestle. Nestle, the Swiss confectionery company. Do a lot of confectionery as well as food products and so on. Nestle, Swiss company, 18 votes. Food company, well-known brand, does Nescafe as well. 18 votes it is. Next on the list, Garena. Garena. I'm unsure what Garena is, but for those who know what it is, how many votes for Garena? Garena, 16 votes. 16, is that all? 16 votes it is, 16. Next on the list, Cocoon. Cocoon. I think that's a closed store, isn't it? Cocoon. I might be wrong. How many people vote for Cocoon? 19, 20 vote for Cocoon. 21. 21, is that all? 22? 22, 23? 23, oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard of it, but they managed to receive 24 votes, the highest so far. Surprising. Well, I don't know what it is. Let me just have a search. Fashion of some sort. It wouldn't let me in. Looks like some kind of cosmetic and fashion and so on. Surprisingly, I think most people in the class probably are female, so hence you know what it is. Next on the list, it's Notion. Notion. For those who know what Notion is, I don't know what Notion is, but how many votes for Notion? 14, I saw 14 earlier. 15 votes for Notion. 16 votes for Notion. 16. McDonald's, the burger joint, fast food burger. Not successful at all in Vietnam. I think there's only about 10 branches in total. 14 votes I saw. Going down, going back up again. 14 votes. Okay, McDonald's, 14 votes it is. Next in the list is Phước Long Coffee and Tea. Phước Long Coffee and Tea, the tea and coffee company. Quite a lot of branches competing with like the Starbucks and the Chongqing. 19 votes. Any more? 19 votes, 20 votes, 21 votes. Okay, going, gone. 21 for Phước Long. I like Phước Long tea, especially the green tea. Intercontinental Hotel. Intercontinental. So For those who are interested in tourism and so on, intercontinental. I wouldn't call it a high class, something like that. So it's medium kind of price and so on. 16 intercontinental is 16 votes. Hot Wheels, the game manufacturer does a lot of different games and toys and so on. Hot Wheels. How many votes for Hot Wheels? 12 hand raised, 13, is that all? 13, 14. Going, gone, 14 votes. Rolex, the Swiss watch, Rolex. Rolex, 19 votes, 20 votes. Rolex, 20 votes it is. Highland Coffee, competition to Footlong and Starbucks and so on. Highland Coffee, how many hands? Hands raised. You see 15 votes, 15 votes. Is that all? 15 votes it is. Herbalife, the Herbalife, the American company, sells also different food and cosmetics and so on, overpriced and so on. How many votes for Herbalife? 12 votes for Herbalife. Trung Nguyen, the most successful coffee chain in Vietnam at the moment. Trung Nguyen, hands up for how many wants to vote for Trung Nguyen. I see 15 votes for Trung Nguyen. Going, gone, 15 votes. E-commerce shop. E-commerce, the Shopee e-commerce. Vietnam's most successful e-commerce website. Bigger than, more sales than Tiki and Lazada and so on. Shopee. 15 votes for Shopee, 15 votes. Going, gone. 15 votes for Shopee. Citrana, I don't know what that is, but for those who know what it is, raise your hand if you want to hear a presentation of Citrana. And you see 11 hand raised, is that it? 12, any more? 13 hand raised for Citrana, 14 hand raised for Citrana. NVIDIA, the graphic card company, does amazing graphic cards. I'm about to buy one myself. Yeah. There's blockchain mining graphic cards and so on. 17 hand raised for NVIDIA. Is that it? 17 hands? Okay, 17 it is. $17 for NVIDIA. Tesla is the Elon Musk electric car company. Tesla. Hands up for those who want to vote for Tesla. Ooh, quite a few. 20 votes, 23 votes for Tesla. Not the highest. 23 votes. So far, the highest was the 24 votes, wasn't it? There was a 24 vote somewhere. 23 was Lush. 24 was Cocoon, the cosmetic company. Adidas, I believe it's a German. Adidas, is it German? I think it's German. German sport brand, Adidas. 20 votes for Adidas, 21, 22 for Adidas. Any more? Any more? No? Okay, 20 votes, 22 votes for Adidas. Okay, last one, LinkedIn. That is the social networking people profile CV kind of website. LinkedIn. And you see 20 votes, 20 votes, any more? 20 votes, okay, 20 votes for LinkedIn. Okay, so voting is closed. I will sort this list according to highest votes down to lowest votes. And the 15 highest will, let me just sort first.
Teacher, I have an opinion.
Yeah, what's your opinion?
I think it's not really fair because someone, can you please mute your speaker?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, I think this is not really fair for everyone because there are some people just raise their hand and yeah, they didn't lower hands, although the idea is passed so many times. Teacher, you are muting.
It is their prerogative. It's up to them whether they want to raise their hand or not. But each person will have a vote. Yeah, it's up to them if they want to keep their hands up or not.
Yes, but we don't know that they forgot to lower their hand or they want to raise their hand.
For those who, okay, we'll everyone lower their hand first, okay? Now everyone's lowered. Those who stick up their hands if you think this is unfair. How many hands up? Yeah, stick up your hands if you think this process is unfair.
Yes, I think if we want to be fair, each of the innovation, the idea on Excel, we have to lower their hand all the time, and then we pick up the idea. Yeah, they raise their hand again.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm putting it up to a vote. If those who accidentally stick up their hand or whatever, if you believe the process which we did, yeah, is unfair, please raise your hand. Yep, can you see there's only 2 people raising their hands. So most people in the class believe it is fair. Are you okay with that? Okay. So most people believe it's fair, so we will sort out the list. Nope, not that one. Let's try data. Sort column E. Maybe is this one? Let's try this. Is the other way around. Sort Z to A one. So Cocoon is the highest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So these are the highest votes. Okay, let's just highlight it. Not yellow, maybe this color, no, maybe blue. No, that's difficult to see. Something lighter, maybe this here. Yep. So just go through again. Cocoon's the highest, followed by Lush, Tesla, Samsung, Adidas, should be 2Ds in Adidas, Body Shops, Uniqlo, Tiki, Fucom, Apple, Muji, Netflix, Rolex, LinkedIn, Absolute Vodka, and Gucci. Okay, those are the highest. Like I said before, you have the option to present. If you do not present, that's totally fine. You still have to. Everyone still have to submit in their individual assignments at the end of the course itself. But for those who presents, you have the opportunity to gain an extra 10%. 5% will be given if you do present, and the other 5% will be given by the class. Yeah, so if you did your presentation well, high quality and so on, the class can give you a maximum of another 5%. So presentation, if you do, you'll get automatically 5%. And if you did well, you get another 5% from the class with a total of 10% in total. Okay, any question from anyone?
Yes, sorry, when exactly do they have to be presented?
Oh, we do it after the midterm exams and so on. Yeah, we got plenty of time anyway. It's not a major issue. Maybe week, let's see, maybe week 8 or week 9 or week 10. It doesn't really matter. For those who, let's say week 10. Yeah, it's easier. Just choose one number and stick to it. Is it okay for week 10? Do you have enough time to prepare?
Yes, for me, be fine. Thanks.
Okay, good. Week 10, it's away from the midterms, so midterms and so on should not affect in terms of timing, in terms of preparation and so on. In terms of material needed for the presentation, you only need about, it's a 10-minute presentation with 5 or 10 minutes question and answer. Yeah, so 10-minute presentation, you shouldn't need too many slides for that. So typically 10 minutes, 2 minutes per slide, maybe 5 slides is more than adequate for a 10-minute presentation. Okay, don't do too much. Like I said, we don't have a lot of time. 15 people plus question and answer. Yeah, so could be 20 minutes in total. Multiply by 15, it's quite a lot. So try to keep it within 5 slides. So in that way, we can go through all 15 students or presentation. But typically, 1 or 2 students will choose not to present. So hopefully, within maybe we'll get 12 presentation in total, maybe 13 presentation in total. So don't worry too much. It should be around like 12 or 13 or so on average. 1 or 2 on average each year tends to give up anyway. Okay. Any other question from anyone else? Okay, if there's no question, we will move on with the lecture. Hopefully we'll have plenty of materials for your multiple choice question during your midterms. I think now it's week 5, yeah, midterms is coming up quite soon, maybe in week 7 or so. Let me check with the timetable. I'll check with the timetable after the class, but it's usually around like week 7 or so. Okay, let's move on. We'll finish with the lecture 1 materials, we move on to the lecture 2 materials. We cover the first part of lecture 2, that's the hacker, hustler, hipster. So we don't need to go through that again. And we will start at the entrepreneurial perspective. So here, so before, in the lecture notes 1, we cover the reason why Vietnam, and we covered the culture of Vietnam in general, why it makes good entrepreneur or bad entrepreneur. Then we kind of covered the entrepreneur as well. The entrepreneurs are basically corporate entrepreneurs. And now we will cover the person, you as a person. What kind of character do you have that's good for entrepreneurships or bad for entrepreneurships? And so we'll try to cover that in the next section itself. Focus more on the person itself rather than the environment or the culture or the type of entrepreneurship, which is entrepreneur or intrapreneur. So in this particular, hopefully we'll try to cover quite a few things. It is 3 o'clock now. So we'll try to cover the entrepreneurial edge. After that, we'll try to understand how innovation, as well as creativity, you need to examine yourself. So the first chapter is the individual. The second chapter is the individual's creativity as well as innovation capacity and so on. And then if we have time, hopefully sometimes a certain semester I don't have time to cover everything. If we have time, we'll cover ethics as well as social entrepreneurships as well. And hopefully all the material which we cover all the way up to around ethics and social entrepreneurs will be the materials which will be examined during your midterm exam. Yeah. So hopefully today as well as next week, which is week 6, we should be able to cover everything. And hopefully your midterm exams will be on all the material up to and including ethics and social entrepreneurships. So in this chapter, we will cover you as a person or as an individual. Do you have what's necessary or what's needed to be an entrepreneur or even an intrapreneur itself? We'll cover what is your strength and what are your weaknesses, and we try to identify your weakness and your strength as well, in terms of your creativity, your entrepreneurial-ish skill set, as well as whether you're right brain or left brain or innovative or not innovative and so on as well. So we try to understand you as a person. Understanding the entrepreneurial edge as an individual or in the individual or in you yourself. These quite old data, so take it with a pinch of salt. I think these data were before most of you were born. I think most of you were born in 1999 and 2000-ish era. I think there's 1 or 2 of you might not, maybe a lot older than that, but most of you is around like 1999 and 2000s kind of cohort. So these data is old, and not only that, it's US data. And so just to kind of hopefully give you kind of indicator. Yeah, it's not necessarily the data is meaningful in Vietnam, but it should give you a relative kind of sense of what portion of the population, not necessarily in Vietnam, but in the US, are entrepreneurs. So in the US, there are in total around sort of like 300 million people. So the population in the US is about 300 million people. Of that, Each year, of the population of 300, there are around like 6 million startups. Yeah, about 40% are subsidies of existing business or entrepreneurs. So 60% of the startups are entrepreneurs, start up by themselves, and of that, 40% are entrepreneurs or through corporate entrepreneurship. This means around like 1% of the population apply for business license, around that. I mean, it's 1-2-ish%. So we get 300 million population. It's slightly more than 300 million. So it's around 6 million of 300 million, is about 2%-ish apply for business license. Of which around 2 million actually buy the business themselves, purchase the business. So some of these co-founders sell startup companies, and then they sell that companies to other people. Yeah, so sometimes there's a double count here. So it's might be 6 million, but some of these, it's one entrepreneur starting more than one startup. Yeah, so there is some double counting here. So this 1%-ish is about right, because potentially a entrepreneur can start more than one business. Some of them actually purchase their business as well, so it's not necessarily start entrepreneur, they purchase the business. And of that, 1.3 million businesses close for various different reasons, whether it's not profitable, personal reasons, or so. Yeah, so of the population, but hopefully it would show to you that not a lot, around only 1% of the population. I mean, this is US, but most other countries are going to be similarly low in terms of percentage of people who become entrepreneurs themselves. Around 1-2% or so of the population. Highest incident of startups is in the southeast of the US, so it's kind of like the East Coast, southeast, nearer to Florida and Virginia and so on. And about 50% of startups were in the service industry, so quite a substantial amount. The US do also have quite a substantial amount in terms of manufacturing industries as well, compared to other countries. For example, Singapore would be the other extreme, where majority of Singapore is all service. There's not much in terms of manufacturing. US, at least mixture of 50-50. Example, in Singapore, around 99% is service industry. About 60% profitable within the first year. Yeah. Majority of startups in general tend to fail within their first year, but after the first year, if they become profitable, then they eventually become established companies. So the definition of established company is 3.5 years of operation. However, the number of self-employed persons fell about 10% between these period, 1994 to 1999, while their income has increased overall. In general, most people, similar to Vietnam and the US data, most people, reason why they become entrepreneur is to have a higher income overall. The main reason why people, especially in the US at least, we see the motivation in Vietnam already, these statistical data. But motivation for most people in general as a whole world, don't forget this is international university, so we try to cover not only in Vietnam, but we look at the whole world internationally as well. So motivation for people to launch their own business, main reason are job satisfaction, as well as achievement, and opportunity and money. So those are the major reasons worldwide. We kind of see the reason for Vietnamese to start a business, but this is kind of like the average worldwide reason. Yes, some of it similar to Vietnam, some of it like money as well as opportunity and job satisfaction and achievement. So not much different to Vietnam there when it compared to the world. In terms of entrepreneurs, usually entrepreneurs are the oldest child of the family or the only child of the family. Main reason, I can't mention it to you before, is the oldest or the only child of the family tends to be independent because they don't have younger siblings. They don't depend on younger siblings in general. The only child don't have younger siblings. So in general, people tend to depend more on them. Yeah, they are more independent. But not necessarily this is 100% true, but majority of entrepreneurs are oldest or only child. There's plenty of exception where the middle child or youngest child become the entrepreneur itself. But in general, majority of the time is the oldest and the only child because they are independent. People rely more on them and they rely less on other people. It's a good character to have as well. And in general, parental influence have a big impact on their choice of being an entrepreneur or self-employed. Very similar, we've seen this very similarly in Vietnam. So typically, entrepreneurs are between the age of 18 and 34. In Vietnam, I think we looked at is 24 and 34 or something like that. So globally, yeah, they started slightly younger compared to the Vietnam data. Especially some countries, such as the Asian Pacific country, have higher rates of young entrepreneurs, more so. In Vietnam, we have older entrepreneurs in general, what we've kind of seen before in previous chapter. Entrepreneurships are developed in both poor and rich country. In general, in poor countries such as the what we looked at, like Thailand, Vietnam, and so on, a factor-based country, compare that to efficient-based and innovation-based, there are a lot more opportunities in general to be entrepreneurs. So if anything, poorer country, there are lots more opportunity to be entrepreneurs compared to rich country. And we see that in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor as well. Poor country, there's more opportunity to start a business, compare that to a developed country such as, say, Singapore or the US or Western Europe, for example. In general, globally, the big three things you need to start a business, the biggest reason or the biggest factor for success or not is the co-founder team itself, you and team and so on. That makes the biggest difference. Yeah. If the person have the right kind of mentality, characters and so on, or the team, yeah, the hustler, hacker and hipsters are there, in general, that will be the biggest factor, the biggest of three, or the big three. If you have team or you have the right person, then it's a very good chance of success when it comes to startup. The second biggest is of the big three is the let me just move this around to make it a little bit more clearer. That it is the team it is most important, followed by the idea, yeah, or the business plan, or whatever it is, the opportunity. So biggest of the big three is the champion, the team or you. Second of the big three is the idea or the opportunity. 90% of the opportunity arise from the current employment. And don't forget, as a student, that will also count. Don't forget that your age group or majority of people, especially in Vietnam, are of your age group. Yeah, so majority of people, you are a professional student, and majority of people, because Vietnam is such a young population, are of student age and so on. So not necessarily employment means you have to have a job, but as a student, you're of the right age group for the right kind of consumer set. Typically 8 to 10 years of experience. Yeah. Most of you are a lot more experienced than that. I think you guys have been students since you are maybe around 6 or 7 years. Yeah, from 6 or 7, and now you're in your 19, 20. So you have 14, 15 years of experience as being a student. So you're way more experienced than most anyway when it comes to requirement of 8 to 10 years of experience. Of the big three, you also need resource as well. Resource could be capital, could be money, could be raw material in terms of the unique materials and so on, only you have access to. So you need resources. Resources to build your company, so that could be in the form of capital. You do need money, but not a lot, not necessarily a lot of money. Yeah. In Vietnam, typically, most of my startups, which I started, some of them very successful and so on, typically maybe $5,000 US to $10,000 US dollar. In Vietnam, in general, tends to be very cheap and easy to start a business. Compare that to other countries around the world, it might be a lot more expensive. In Western Europe or the US to start a business. Reason to start a business, the go reason, and reason not to start a business, the no-go reasons. Yeah, so if you have financial obligation, a lot of financial obligation, then it's not a good idea to start a business. If you need securities, not monetary securities, but security as in being safe and low risk, salaries and so on, then don't start a business. But if you need money, securities and so on, then you should start a business because entrepreneurs in general tend to pay a lot more or tend to have a lot more money compared to salary-based kind of people. If you have family obligation, then it's not a good idea to start a business. You're not going to have a lot of time. Yeah, so if you don't have a lot of time, your family issues, if you have any, will just only get worse. And if you are inexperienced as well, most of you are very experienced as being a student. Most of your customers potentially are of student age anyhow, so that's not a major factor, especially in Vietnam. In older countries in other parts of the world, maybe that will be a problem, but in Vietnam, most people of your age group anyhow. Reason for starting a business. If you have financial resource, definitely. I mean, yeah, not only that, if you're successful, your financial resource is going to get bigger anyhow. If you are a self-actualization, if you have the motives and you are a self-starter, yeah, so typically that's why the eldest or the only child tends to make good entrepreneurs, because they are self-actualization or self-starter. If you have family support, also a good reason. So typically, majority of startups get their support from not only their family, but also from their friends. If you don't have family support, it's not a good idea, especially if you have family obligation as well. In addition, you need more support from the family, not the other way around. If your family needs support, then maybe it's not a good idea. As well as you have relevant experience as well. Yeah, experience, yes, it's true. It's good to have some experience, especially when you play the clean tech assignment. Some experience is good. The more you play a clean tech, the more experience you get, the better you get at the game. If you're inexperienced, if you have not played and it's the first time a clean tech assignment or the first simulation you ever make, you will go bankrupt. That is natural. Yeah, so some experience is good, and you see that when you run your startup in clean tech assignment. Characters which are good for entrepreneurs. So here in this chapter, we cover reason why you, or what's good about you, what are the advantage to have if you want to be an entrepreneur. Confidence is very important. Perseverance, determination, lots and lots of energy, diligence, very resourceful because lack of capital and so on. Being resourceful, capital is not a major key. You figure out, you find ways. Yeah, that's what resourceful means. Ability to take on calculated risks. It's all about taking on calculated risks. Yeah, you don't take risks as in gambling. As an entrepreneur, you take only calculated risks. Yeah, the risks that you can take on. Yeah, risks which you cannot take on, then you don't take it on. Dynamism, leadership, optimism, need to achieve, facility, knowledge of products, market, machinery, technologies, creativity. So these are very good characters to have. Weaker characters to have when it comes to entrepreneurs, less so. So it's ranked in that order. Strongest first, weaker kind of characters to be an entrepreneurs further down the list. So things like further down the list, such as maturity and balance, honesty, integrity, sensitivity to others, as well as ability to trust workers, commitments, efficacy, and so on, are weaker down in the list. Yeah, confidence, determination, perseverance, energy, motivation, diligence, resourcefulness. These are very important characters to have if you want to be an entrepreneur. These are quite old numbers again. These 1998 numbers, so be careful to give with a pinch of salt. Demographic in terms of being entrepreneurs, 70% of businesses are started by one person. Yeah, so in general, single entrepreneurs are the other number which we look at, 2.4, are the average of successful entrepreneurs or business. Sorry. But here we look at the statistic of single entrepreneurs. Yeah, 7% of businesses are started by one person. 36% of businesses are started by women. This is global average. Yeah, not a lot of women in Vietnam in 2017 and 2018. More women started business than men, but typically around the world in general, more men to start a business than women. That's what we can see, substantially more. 7% of the business in general tends to attend a university or a higher educational, whether it's university or technical school or college. 63%, quite a substantial number, were married at the time when they started a business. And the median household income, this is global, I mean, this is the US average, is around 40,000 to 60,000 US dollar per year. In Vietnam, it would be a lot less. You know, so don't compare your salary or your potential salaries to American salaries. It's America notoriously tends to have very high salaries anyway. 77% were employed at the time when they start a business or purchase a business. Yeah, so you don't give up your day jobs. Yeah? A startup is just a part-time job. A startup is a part-time job. You use your employee or your salaries to help with capital and so on. Reason for starting business, this is also US and old data as well, but it should give us a good kind of some information, on what the country actually are doing, other than Vietnam. We kind of see the Vietnamese numbers already. So reason for starting the business, 26% is to grow the business, 37% is to increase the standard of living, it's better, more decent living. So majority of people is because of a higher income or better standard of living. Second highest is supplemental income, in addition maybe to your employee, or if you own more than one business, so it's supplemental to that. And less so, 4%, only 4%, until something better come along. But there's good side to being entrepreneurs, and there are bad side, things like risks and so on. The bad side, the good side, if you're successful and so on, you're gonna make a lot of money. But the bad side, we need to cover both sides. We need to cover the bad side, the dark side of being entrepreneur. Is you need to be able to face some risks, even though these are calculated risks, but risks do exist, such as financial risks, your career risks, your family and social risks, as well as your psychological risks. Let's just write that down. Psychic risks or psychological. Psychological risks. Oops, let's do what? That's quite big, isn't it? Let's remove it. It's too long. It's covering the diagram. Psychic risk, close enough. And in general, people seek different activities and so on. So typically, we can spread the risk across these 4 different quadrants. Yeah. So on one dimension, we measure the financial risk. And in the other dimension, we measure the profit motivation and so on. So typically, when you look for, when you're looking for low risk, when you're avoiding risk, in general, you actually are activity seeking, but you are profit motives actually are low as well. Whereas high risk, you are profit seeking. Yeah, so high risk, high return, low risk, low return. Yeah, so that makes sense there. So these are in the right kind of dimension: low risk, low return, high risk, high return. And if you're lucky, you can also look for things which are low risk but high return as well. The things which you should not be looking for is high risk but low return. Yeah, because it does not make sense. It's not paying back the kind of risk which you are taking on. You're taking on lots of risks and stress and so on, and you're not being remunerated or even paid for the kind of risk you take on. So the bottom 3 quadrant here makes sense. Yeah, high risk, high return, or if you want to take on low risk, low return, or if you want to take on, this is most best situation to be, low risk but high return. What you don't want to be is in this particular quadrant, high risk but low return. Stress can be very, can affect you in a lot of different ways. And being an entrepreneur, so it will affect you substantially as well. I think we run out of time anyway. Next week we will cover the dark side of being an entrepreneur, about stress that you will face when you become an entrepreneur, as well as how to deal with these stress as well. Yeah, but I don't think we have time to do that. Source of stress, and not only that, ways to deal with stress when it comes to being entrepreneurs. I think we run out of time anyway. So, any question from anyone before we finish? Question on the individual assignments? Any question there? No one? No question? Okay, if there are no questions, I will see you next week then. Well, not see you. I will talk to you next week through online class. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.